Good morning, Brother Chad Long here with you, and today's got to be better than yesterday. Have you ever had a day you just wish you could start over? I mean, just completely start over and do it again. Yesterday started all right. We had a prayer meeting, and let's see, afterward, I don't remember what I did immediately afterward, but I got called out by two people at once. I had two friends, members of our community, who, interestingly enough, neither of these men are members of our church, and as far as I know, have never been to our church, but both friends that I've made since I've lived here, and both in need of help. One called me a couple minutes before the other, and both of them had a tractor down and needed me right away. And so I had to tell one no and the other one yes, because I really need to tell them both no. I got a mountain of things to do here. But I didn't. I try to help folks, and I can't seem to say no. So I went to the one and told the other I'd try tomorrow, or today actually, this morning. So I'll come back to that. Anyway, so the one who I said I'd go help, I actually went and I was a help to him and saved him, I can tell you in all honesty, $2,000 or more. Because he was convinced he was going to need a hydraulic pump, and they're expensive and they're hard to replace, and there's a lot of work goes into it, and so it's going to be over $1,200 just for the part plus all the labor. It was going to be a couple $1,000s, and he was at the point he was about to order it, and I said, well, no, let me look at it, let me make sure that's what's wrong. And sure enough, praise God, I found out it wasn't the hydraulic pump. It was something else entirely, and it was something I could fix. And so I fixed it, and I was so proud, and it took me a half a day. I mean, after our prayer meeting and after I got about to eat and did whatever I did afterwards and headed out, I mean, it was nearly noon before I got over, and I didn't get home till 6 o'clock, so a good half a day. But, and I know I need to get to the lesson, and we're in Hebrews 3, but let me tell you this is so sad. I've been having an issue with my pickup that I've been ignoring for about 6 months. I knew about it, but I've been ignoring it because I've got too much else to do, and it wasn't hurting anything. But my shifter is got a lot of slack in it. It doesn't go into park every time. I have to be real careful putting it in park, because if I'm not careful, it won't go in park, it'll go in reverse. But I knew that, and I've been watching it real carefully and making sure it was in gear before I get in or out. Well, I was leaving this man's house. After I fixed his tractor and saved him a couple grand, I get up to the gate, and I think I'm putting it in park. I have to open the gate, so I think I'm putting it in park, and I get out to open the gate. And I get to the gate, and I happen to hear something, so I turn around, and there my truck is in reverse, running back down the driveway. And so, oh my goodness, I take off running at a sprint. Boy, can this fat man move. Praying the whole way, and I don't make it in time. The truck goes through the fence, and it's a pretty nice fence. So, looks like they just built it not long ago. So, now I owe the man a fence. And it's just, you talk about one wishing the whole day was over. In addition to that, my wife drove all the way to Houston, for a dog that was promised to my son. Our dog died last year, and we're down to just one. At one point, we had three, because the kids had a dog, and then I had a dog. My wife has a dog. My dog died. The kid's dog ran off and got hit. So the only dog we have is my wife's dog. We've been promising my son a German Shepherd puppy when we could find one we could afford, because they're expensive. We found one very reasonably priced, mixed breed, but has Shepherd in it, and very, very happy with the dog. And they drove all the way to Houston to get it, and the people did us real dirty. They sold the dog to somebody 10 minutes before we got there, after telling us they'd hold the thing. So just a horrible experience. My wife went all the way to Houston for nothing, and I feel like I went over there for nothing. You can't make any money when you're tearing up people's fences. However, God is still good. The devil's not going to knock me off path. We're going to be okay. And I've wasted 4 minutes of your time telling stories. I'm sorry. I just felt like I needed to tell somebody, so I told you guys, and I hope you at least got a laugh out of that. I guess the moral of the story is, if you know you've got a problem with your pickup, fix it before you drive the thing. All right. Hebrews 3 says, wherefore. Now, this wherefore is, it's always good to look backwards when you see a wherefore or a therefore. When we left off, we were looking at what Jesus had done to take away the fear of death and bondage. So we closed out verse 18 with, chapter 2, 18, with, for in that he himself hath suffered, being tempted, he is able to succor them that are tempted. And that just means he's able to comfort those who are tempted because he was tempted. He knows what that's like. And then he says, wherefore, therefore, because of these things, holy brethren. Now he's calling these Jews holy brethren, these Hebrews, but all of us who are saved are holy brethren based on the holiness of Christ, not ourselves. But he's talking to Hebrew Christians, so holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling is just a fancy way of saying, okay, guys, those of you who belong to him, consider the apostle and high priest of our profession. Now, all of the rest of this sentence is unique. First of all, apostle is never anywhere else applied to Christ. But I found out after I did some digging and some study that the high priest back then was sometimes called the apostle of God. Now, I didn't know that. I thought apostle came up after the disciples. But apparently it was a word that had just began to be in use that century. It was pretty common. So if you're talking about the high priest and you call him God's apostle, and you're talking about the great high priest, Jesus Christ, well, then it makes sense to refer to him as the apostle, the high priest, the intercessor, the advocate. I mean, all of these would work. So while it's not unusual as far as that century goes, it's very unusual in the Bible. This is the only place you can find him referenced in that way. So I say that to just clear up what he's saying when he says apostle and high priest. This is Jesus Christ, which he makes clear at the end of verse 1. But the other interesting thing is the word profession here. Profession here is interchangeable with the word confession. So if you read it that way, there's nothing wrong with the way they have it written, but it's not really a profession the way we know it today, because it's not what they do for a living. But to profess means a great deal more. I mean, I can profess just about anything. We have professors to this day who their job is to profess something to you. And to confess is very similar. If I confess something to you, I'm admitting something to you. If I profess something to you, I'm teaching you something. Well, if I'm confessing something to you about myself that you didn't already know, I'm teaching you something about me. So you can see how the two words in some instances can be similar. So, and they are. So they can even be interchangeable in some sentences, and that's the case here. So when you read this, it just means those of you who are holy brethren, believers like me, consider the calling of our high priest Jesus, the high priest of our profession, the one who is over us, and here's all that we have to say is just all that's saying. So that was a long way around the mountain, but there we go. Verse 2, who was faithful, and by the way, who is always faithful. Human beings struggle to find somebody faithful in relationships, in not just marital relationships, but in friendship relationships, in job relationships, and going all the way to Houston for a dog relationships. I mean, we look for people to be faithful to us and tell us as it is. So you can trust in Jesus, who was faithful then and is faithful still now, who was faithful to him that appointed him. Now that's a reference to God. He is God, but he was incarnated as a human, and he was faithful to God throughout his life. And so the reference here is a picture of a human being, albeit God, who was appointed by an almighty God, and he was faithful to him in place of us who have not been. If you're being honest, this is convicting, because he was faithful, we are not. We have failed in so many ways, and we continue to, but Jesus is always faithful, and faithful in our place. He says, as also Moses was faithful in all his house. Now, that's a very bold statement about Moses, because Moses had three main sections of his life: the first 40 years, the second 40 years, and the final 40. And he made errors in all three, but he definitely made some improvements, particularly when he circumcised his boys to the detriment of his wife. We won't go there, but just know that he was faithful with his whole household the best he was able. And here we're comparing Jesus to Moses. It's interesting because in chapter 1, we glorify God and talk about how he's greater than the angels. But then in chapter 2, we bring him back down to earth and show how he brought himself lower than the angels to do the job that he was brought into this world to do. Chapters 3 and 4 are very similar, the structure, because chapter 1 did what it did so that chapter 2 could answer it. Chapter 3 is going to do what it does so that chapter 4 can answer it. You'll see this when we get there. But for now, we're comparing Jesus to Moses and also to the high priest. We'll see that later. All right, so I'm fixing to run out of time. Let me get to where I'm going. Who was faithful to him that appointed him, as also Moses was faithful in all his house. For this man was counted worthy of more glory than Moses. In fact, if you want to be honest, Moses spoke of Christ and how he would come later after him and like him. Anyway, inasmuch as he who hath builded the house hath more honor than the house. He says Jesus has more honor than Moses, just as the builder of a house has more honor than the house itself. When you're driving by and you look at a house and it's nice, you may say, wow, what a nice home. Well, too often we pay too much attention to the home and not enough attention to the builder of the home. In fact, I can count on one hand how many times I've said, wow, who must have built that? No, instead it's like, wow, what a really nice home. Must be nice to have one of those. Well, these guys had a habit of putting Moses too high on a pedestal and God not on a high enough pedestal. And if you understand Jesus is God, well, then you're guilty of that as well. And he had to clear this up because when you're talking to Jews in that century, they had a real dilemma. They were struggling to let go of some of these things that they had put too high priority on. Look, it was always important. It still is. God's law still is. I will never tell you to discard God's law or the Old Testament. They are important. Always have been. But when you put them too high on your list, well, then you begin to minimize other things God's trying to show you. You can become legalistic and a little too holier than thou. So this is what they were doing, and he has to make this point. This man was counted worthy of more glory than Moses, and as much as he who hath builded the house hath more honor than the house. For every house is builded by some man, but he that hath built all things is God. And so it's not so important what was built, it's more important who built it. And so we need to understand that. Verse 5, and I'll close here. And Moses, verily, was faithful in all his house as a servant for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken after. But Christ as a son over his own house, whose house are we, if we hold fast the confidence and the rejoicing of the hope from unto the end. I really I've got a kid hollering at me, so I'm going to have to cut this off. They're fixing to come in here and interrupt my video anyway. Basically, we're going to compare Jesus and Moses, and it's not necessary for me. I get it, but apparently it was necessary at the time for them. What I'd have you get out of this is always put God in the proper perspective and follow after him and show him that honor and respect and follow all the things that are in the Bible, but always remember that it's always about God, God first. And so, all right, well, you guys have a great day, a blessed day, hopefully a better one than I've had. There's that kid who's going to interrupt my video, even though she knows that I'm busy. I'm trying to get this done. Love you, sweetie. All right, did you just wake up or something? You guys have a good week. God bless you.